Beckett finally does something, anything. It's really great to see that they're trying to get into some sort of different thing. So they are partnering, or they bought a company called Get Knox, which I looked into it. It's kind of like it almost seems like it's trying to be a social media for cards. Like it's like a tracking system that there's also, it looks like there's a forum that it's also like you can find different cards. I think it's a good step in the right direction for Beckett, because I think Beckett, in my opinion, has sort of they've they've tried to stay the course. They haven't really gone super crazy. Like PSA, it almost seems like PSA is just grabbing at straws everywhere. Like they don't, and I think that they do know what they're doing, but it seems like every move they make is almost counterintuitive to the previous move, where Beckett has literally just almost made no moves, in my opinion. And I think one of the reasons, honestly, it could be that people are still grading RPAs and like expensive cards with Beckett. Like you see most of like the high end national treasures, the like high end cards are still being graded by Beckett. So like they're probably looking at it and saying, well, what changes do we need to make if people are still choosing our service over PSA for some of these high end cards? And I don't know exactly what their structure is for their upcharges. Like if you're grading an RPA, like I am not 100% sure what they're doing when it comes to like if it's a one of one or if it's whatever the RPA is, like what they're doing upcharges. But yeah, so it's good to see that Beckett is trying to make some sort of move to kind of move into a content sort of thing. Like we've seen with PSA, like they started a podcast. They've been putting out way more data as content, which I think probably has to do with Golden and Card Ladder kind of all being together. They have all that data. So PSA has been really good at coming out with more content. And it seems like this is sort of what Beckett is trying to do. I think that they're trying to build a platform, or this platform it's still kind of in the beginning stage. Like if you go to their Twitter, it's still sort of like in the early stages of what the company I think will end up being. Uh, so when I looked into it, like I said, it's basically a company that you can track all the prices of your cards. You can find new cards, and then it said something like build a community around your cards, which I do think is very interesting. I think it's kind of almost like Reddit in a way, where Reddit has a bunch of different subreddits about different topics. Like maybe if they almost do it like that, where it's like subcategories or sub players. I don't know exactly how they're going to do it. I think it's still in the beta phase. So I think there's still like early access that's being given. So it's not in the full release stage yet. Um, but from a content perspective, I think this will give I think it'll give Beckett maybe more of an opportunity to do more content. I think it might even give Beckett more specific insights, because I think if I'm comparing this to some of the other, like with PSA, like PSA doesn't necessarily have they do have they do like the blowout forums in a way. It's almost kind of like that. It seems like they're trying to like they're taking like um the card ladder feature of like keeping your collection, and then also some of the data. They're trying to get like a Reddit or a blowout forums all on this one platform. So it's going to be interesting to see what Beckett's overall plans are for the future. I don't know for sure kind of what they want to do. Like I said, I feel like with the fact that they get all these RPAs, they really have just looked at this situation and said, we don't really need to make any huge major changes, because people are still grading with us. Like, even if people don't like the fact that there's not much communication, or they don't like the fact that they don't really go super crazy when it comes to content like some of these other companies. If people are still using the service, if they're still using the high end part of the service, why would they want to cater towards grading base cards, I guess, is one thing. Because like PSA, a lot of their data is base card related. So it's like it's a very interesting kind of dynamic when it comes to grading right now, because I think SGC is also sort of in the business of grading base cards. And I think you're seeing other grading companies come in and with the base cards in mind, where for if you're looking at a collector, you're looking at someone who actually has a high end RPA, I'd say 70, 75, 25, 75% of the time they're going to go to Beckett. I don't think there are many high end RPAs that are just graded by PSA. So overall, that's sort of why I think Beckett has not changed too much compared to like what PSA has done. Obviously, with PSA, with the backlog and with all that type of stuff, they have to cater towards the people who are sending in the base cards because that's, I guess, their business model. They're looking at it more from a volume standpoint, where Beckett is looking at it more of a type of RPA high end, maybe even autographs, for example. They're looking at it from more of a high end standpoint, where PSA is looking at more of a volume standpoint, which I like. I mean, I think it's PSA is very interesting because they do have that kind of base that's like the base cards and the lower end kind of slabs, but then they also have high end stuff that they've been grading recently. So it's like it's definitely a very interesting combination of what PSA is trying to do, like versus what Beckett's trying to do. I think that they've definitely taken two completely different approaches. I think SGC has been kind of in the middle a little bit. I think SGC has really, they've sort of gone a little bit more towards what PSA has done, like changing prices, coming out with more content. They don't really grade too many RPAs. Like I think that they did do, although there was a video that came out recently with SGC that was, I think they graded the one of one immaculate to a RPA. So that was part of a reel, which I thought was pretty cool. But like overall, PSA, SGC are probably more base card heavy, where Beckett is definitely going to be more RPA heavy, which is, I think that's what's affecting their marketing and why they're doing the stuff that the way that they're doing it. I think if we're looking at the top three grading companies, obviously, I think it goes PSA, Beckett, SGC. SGC has definitely come into that conversation more over the past year or so than Beckett has really done to stay in that conversation. But I think but at the same time, like I think you could argue both sides. Like, does Beckett even need to do the stuff that SGC and PSA are doing if people are still choosing them for RPAs? Like, are they, if they're still choosing Beckett to grade their higher end cards, like, do they even really need to go out of their way to try and make any changes? I think that's maybe the conversation that I would guess is being had at Beckett. I think Beckett is also sort of a nostalgic brand a little bit because they were sort of the first first sports card magazine company as well. Like they had all, like if you talk to anybody who's maybe getting back into sports cards or who was into sports cards like a way back, way before the internet, which isn't actually way back, that's like 20 years ago. But either way, like if you talk to anybody who was into sports cards back then, the Beckett price guide was what eBay comps are right now. So I feel like there's a way that Beckett could make almost a comeback from a nostalgic standpoint. I don't think they necessarily could do the price guide anymore, but I almost think if they tried to expand their magazine business, I think that would be kind of a cool option. And maybe that's what, maybe the fact that they're getting into, the acquisition of this type of company, maybe that is something that they're looking to do. Maybe they're looking at other opportunities to expand the brand, which, like I said, they may not even want to expand the brand. I think it's kind of the conversation of like sports cards. It's like collectors were kind of in sports cards for so long, and there wasn't, anything super crazy that was coming out. There weren't any uh, crazy number of products, crazy number of autographs, crazy prices. And then all of a sudden, it's like everybody's into sports cards and everybody is driving up the prices. They're increasing the product, which is maybe not exactly what people want. But I think it's maybe similar where it's like people maybe didn't want so much media attention, honestly, on sports cards because all that did was increase the prices and brought in people that were maybe not in it for the reasons that they were in it, which, like I said, I don't necessarily disagree with those people, but at the same time, like I'm one of the people that kind of came in that probably was somebody that I'm a media person. I mean, that's sort of, I think I buy and sell cards occasionally, but I'm definitely more of a media person than I am like a buyer and seller, like we're reacting to the news. So maybe people looked at that and said that they don't like the media people, the influencers. I put influencers in quotation because it's like people will just, there's something called a straw man argument, which is like somebody who has a argument or they see something that they don't like, they make up somebody that's the argument. So they make up, the influencers did this, or the influencers have ruined sports cards or whatever. But they make up essentially what the influencers have done. So that way they have an argument because they know that other people are going to agree with their argument, regardless of what it even is, to be honest. But either way, I think Beckett coming in, I think it's going to be really cool to see sort of what Beckett has plans for, if they're going to go on a limb and make any changes, or if this is sort of going to be like an extension of the blowout forum, which I think if I if maybe if I'm Golden or if I'm another company, I'm looking at the blowout forum and maybe trying to buy it somehow. I don't know how, and that's sort of a crazy thing because then you probably would have to buy Blowout, which isn't really realistic because they're like one of the biggest sports card retailers. But either way, I think the forum itself, I just think that there's interesting data that comes from that forum, and I think if Beckett is trying to create something that's similar to that, they're probably going to get some interesting data, and it's going to be really cool to see what Beckett decides to do with this new platform that they just bought.